That's one small step for man.
AI rebels, please.
Giant leap for mankind.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the AI Rebels podcast. We are very excited to be here. I'm your co-host, Jacob.
And I am your co-host, Spencer. And today we have with us Austen Allred. Austen he has a long history in tech. Most recently, he was working on Bloom Tech, and now he has launched a new initiative called Gauntlet AI. Austen, tell us a little bit about yourself and just quickly do a quick introduction of Gauntlet AI.
Yeah, the 30-second version is, I dropped out of college and taught myself to learn how to code and got into tech that way, living in a car in San Francisco, trying to teach myself to code as fast as I could. And from there, we started what was originally called Lambda School after a trademark dispute, changed our name to Bloom Tech to kind of help people take the same path of getting into code. And over time that evolved into Gauntlet, which Gauntlet is now, it's a completely free AI training for the top engineers on the planet. So we'll fly you out to Austen, we put you up in housing, we feed you 3 meals a day, and we get you to the cutting edge of building with AI. So Gauntlet students basically don't write code. AI writes all of the code and then become absolute masters of doing that. And then we match them with companies who hire them on the other side.
Oh, so you also take care of the matching to the company after the program.
That's the way we monetize Gauntlet. So we make students available to our hiring partners who pay basically a recruiting fee to hire them, and that funds the entire thing. So students never pay us anything, no matter what, ever.
Okay. So is this kind of an evolution of the information, or excuse me, I don't remember the exact term for it, but you had an agreement at your previous, ventures with Lambda and Bloom Tech, where basically the students paid nothing up front, and then, when they got a job, there was some sort of revenue, or not, oh my gosh, income. Yeah. Thank you. I just finally remembered it. I'm out of it.
Yeah,
the income share agreement. So it's kind of an evolution of that.
Yeah. This is what so if you look at what an income share agreement did, it basically let the employer pay for the student's tuition via the student and, running through taxes. So the end goal was always to get the employer to pay for everything, but that is hard when they don't, haven't met people up front and they don't know if it's the right person. But with Gauntlet, we've kind of been able to close that loop. So it is just fully paid for by the employer. And it's 1,000 times simpler for everybody. Way better.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
Oh, man. I want
to hear more about it.
I know I have so many questions. I want to back up to the coding in a car in San Francisco for a second. How were you from San Francisco? Were you like, I'm going to the coding mecca, live in a car? How did that happen?
Yeah, more the latter. So I was in college and I was just bored out of my mind. I knew I wanted to be in tech. And when I was like 16, I reference this from time to time. I went to I met an astronaut who was one of my heroes and was like, okay, so, give me the best piece of advice you can. I was like 16. And he was like, just figure out what's the most exciting thing in the world to you and go figure out how to get in the middle of it. Cool. So, after I graduated from high school, I served a Mormon mission in Eastern Ukraine. And then I came back and I was like, okay, what's the most exciting thing? I only kind of knew that software was I knew I wanted to start a company. I loved software. I loved the internet. I didn't realize that there was a full career path in an industry and a mecca of that until later on. And, so I was reading TechCrunch and Hacker News and all that stuff. And I was like, you know what? College is so slow. It's driving me insane. I'm just going to figure out how to get into the middle of it. And I found a blog post of a guy. I should look it up at some point. His name was Kurt, I think. Who he was like, hey, I wanted to become a designer and I, wanted to focus purely on design. And I wanted to work in tech. So I moved out of my apartment and I lived in my 2-door Honda Civic while I taught myself design and got my first job in design in tech.
Wow.
And I was like, wait, I have a 2-door Honda Civic.
It's a sign.
What's stopping me? So yeah, I basically just drove out to, I should have said Palo Alto, but San Francisco is more the epicenter. Because I would sleep on random streets in Palo Alto, and then I worked out of a place called the Hacker Dojo during the day while I taught myself how to code. And frankly, while I waited for the car to cool down enough that you could go to sleep, because it's not always even it's not the most comfortable of living situations when it's in the summer.
Yeah.
But yeah, made it work. Ended up working at a YC-backed tech company as a growth engineer, and from there, all of my friends and family were saying, "How did you do that? I was a college dropout who knew nothing not long ago, and now I'm making six figures working in tech. Like, I'm going to do what you did." And you're like, that there's probably a better way. So originally, just started teaching some friends how to code online, and it evolved into, I mean, it's a decade later now, but yeah.
There are only so many two-door Honda Civics to go around.
Yeah, there were.
Can't
I
storm
think I
them.
bought mine for $4,000 or $5,000, which I don't even think that's an option anymore. But
Oh my gosh. Wow. I mean, that just. So when was that? How long ago was that when you
I'm
started?
bad with years, but that would have been like 2013 ish. It honestly could have been 2011 or 24. It was like more than a decade ago, less than 20 years ago. Yeah.
At what point did you become aware of AI? Like, do you remember when you got into that lane?
I mean, was always broadly aware of AI. It's funny, when we were going through Y Combinator with Bloom Tech, so you're assigned kind of two group partners, and Stripe invested in us in the Series A. I'm skipping around timelines, but our group partner was Daniel Gross, who had just sold an AI company to Apple and is now the founder of one of the, I forget the name, one of the giant, raised $1 billion out of the gate super tech AI companies. So in like 2016, 2017, I guess a couple things happened in succession. When I was working at LendUp, I met Sam Altman for the first time, and he was at the time he was just working at YC. He was running YC, and had lunch with him. I'm sure he doesn't even remember this. It was me and a group of other random employees at one of the companies he invested in, and we were like, "What are you thinking about?" And he's like, "All I think about is AI and nuclear." And like those two things are
Interesting.
everything. And that was that was before the transformer paper that made generative AI possible. This is a different era of AI. And then Daniel Gross, a few months later, was our YC partner, and he was like, "You should just drop everything and go all in on AI," which was interesting, but it was also 2017 and was probably too early to make that call. But we've been thinking about it and watching it for a long time. It just wasn't ready yet, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I was going to say 2017. That's right when the Transformer paper came out originally, if I remember. Is that 2017?
I think it might have been a little later, but I don't remember. Regardless, I didn't know about the Transformer paper at the time for sure, so I can tell you that.
Yeah. So from there, what was kind of what would you say was the AI development that caused your ears to perk up and pay attention?
Yeah. So, if you fast forward to a couple years ago now, I mean, GPT coming out was hard to ignore for everybody. But I was still, I was honestly a little skeptical, partially because we had just had a big like push internally where everybody was saying, "Hey, everybody wants to hire Web3 engineers, go build a Web3 program." So we built a Web3 program. And by the time we were finished building the Web3 program, Web3 had imploded and nobody came. And I was like, okay, I can't just build programs based on whatever the whims of the tech hype is at any given time. And I thought, I'd done a little bit of playing around with GPT-5 and Copilot was like very new. I think it was in beta at the time. Talked with Nat, who was then at GitHub, a little bit about it, but it was so early. And we had, so the original, the honest reality is I was going out to companies after the junior market totally collapsed underneath us because we were training junior engineers and we were paid based on those junior engineers getting hired, and that market just got decimated. People could still get hired, but it was 10 times harder than it had been in 2021, as an example. So we're like, hey, what can we do to, do we need to find you? Everybody was reducing headcount, driving costs down, more overseas, everything. Like, hey, should we build an international program? And every hiring partner we talked to was saying, we want AI, AI, AI. And we would say, okay, what does that mean? And everybody would say, we don't know, but we've seen a demo on Twitter
Yeah.
and it's intriguing, isn't it? And we're like, yeah, it's definitely intriguing. But for me, I had developed some immunity to people wanting to be trained in the latest and greatest technology that would be around for 2 months and then would be replaced. So I approached it originally as kind of a research project. So we sent out a team to say, go talk to all the companies that say they're using AI and see if they're actually using it in any material way.
Interesting.
But your requirements are, you can't come back to me and say, hey, AI is super promising and it's real and the hype is there if it's not actually in production at scale in a real way. So I think we went out and we talked to hundreds of people, and 99% of them either had very little AI actually implemented in production, or they had really cool prototype proof of concepts that were very far away from actually being used in front of users and stuff like that.
Right.
But that's the 1% just blew us away. I mean, that was literally, you talk to someone who's been playing. I mean, now a lot of this is done for you automatically. But in 2022, 2023, people who are like, okay, there's this thing called agents, and I have all these agents writing a bunch of code for me, and I take my code base and I vectorize it and I feed it to the model this way. All the stuff that you kind of get for free off the shelf with Cursor and Claude and stuff today, they're doing it all very manually. But those companies would be like, yeah, we don't know what Johnny over there is doing in the basement, but he's replaced an entire team, and we don't ask questions, so go talk to him. And there are literally 3 or 4 people that we found who were at that level, and we were like, this changes I joke that when you see that for the first time, you lose a couple of nights of sleep and you can't fully wrap your mind around it. And so we're like, all right, let's go. If we introduce all of these, these 3 people together and let them learn from each other, there are no best practices of how to do any of this. There's no, it's very
experimental.
edge.
Right.
Yeah. Can we take this and teach this to companies and let's build a course around it? So we did that. And the day that we launched that course, we were charging, I think, $5,000 an engineer. Companies started sending us 100 engineers at a time. We're like, okay, that's crazy. Honestly, it saved the company. We were probably going to go bankrupt without that.
Wow.
And then from there, gradually it became what Gauntlet is today, where it was like, okay, let's do something even more in depth and with more focus, more in depth, more focus. Then actually, instead of taking our engineers we currently have, let's find a bunch of psychos. We'll fly everybody to Austen. We'll cover all the costs of everything. And we need people spending 1,000 hours just building with AI. And let's see what happens on the other side. And that became Gauntlet.
So I'm really interested in hearing more about Gauntlet specifically. So one of the criticisms that Bloom Tech and Lambda have received is that, that you get to the end of it and it's not a guaranteed job at the end. I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but obviously there's something to be said for individuals' responsibilities in finding a job. There's something to be said for the company's responsibility for helping people find jobs. From your perspective, how would you say Gauntlet has kind of learned from those lessons in the past, and have you given thought to how you can create a more consistent experience for students, given how how different everybody is as a student?
Yeah, I think some of my solutions to that are probably not politically correct or the ideal. They're not going to sound or feel good.
Right.
But
it's a sticky problem.
The difficult part of Bloom Tech, among many of the difficult parts, the 2 things that would keep us up at night are selection bias. So if we became known as I think we were like, look, we can take someone who is, has terrible circumstances and turn them into a software engineer. And isn't that amazing? And companies started seeing us as oh, that is the place where you can hire software engineers who come from terrible circumstances, almost, an act of charity / isn't it cool / economic mobility. But that's
interesting.
I mean, you're literally setting out to solve. I mean, we did that all the time, right?
Yeah.
So probably hundreds, maybe thousands of people who we took from minimum wage to six figures. But that's very difficult to do, and not, the average person making minimum wage. Honestly, I don't know how to help them do that, right? So we're all focused on, over time, I became convinced that the most important part of Bloom Tech was actually the admissions process. How do we find the diamond in the rough? And we did a lot of, spent all of our money and time and effort in curriculum and support and, helping you get a job. But it takes, sometimes you can't overcome selection in anything.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the number one lesson of Gauntlet was, we had all this data. We knew exactly, there were the top, 50% of every Bloom Tech cohort was hired automatically. We did nothing, like zero work whatsoever. And, the top handful of each cohort were like, however much money you're paying them, they're underpaid. They're just absolutely incredible people. And that's not because of us. That's just who they are. So lesson one of Gauntlet was, let's find those people and let's train those people. We're very, very exclusive. We're not, generally speaking, we're not taking people from minimum wage to massive jobs. We're taking people from great opportunities to better. So that's one way. The other way is, this is what we wish we could have done in a reasonable way at Bloom Tech, but you kind of can't, because at Bloom Tech, once a student becomes a customer, once they're in the program, they're a customer, right?
Right. Yeah.
And you have to do everything you can to above and beyond. We knew that we would lose money on a bunch of students, but you're obligated to do everything you possibly can to help them. And we never found a way to determine who that would be before they showed up. And there are a bunch of different reasons why that would be the case, but we couldn't figure that out on the admissions side. So with Gauntlet, we said, actually, I want to turn that into a strength of ours. So Gauntlet is completely free for you. But the reason it is named Gauntlet is because we require insane dedication. People don't believe me when I say it's 80 to 100 hours a week. But if you were to walk into this office at 11 p.m. tonight, it will be completely full. If you were to walk into the office on Saturday at 11 p.m. at night, it will be completely full. And that's just because that's the level of dedication we require. Now, not everybody is up for that. So Gauntlet, every week there's a new challenge. And if you don't make it through that challenge, you are removed from the program.
Okay, so people actually are removed.
Roughly half of the people who start, looking at the first couple of cohorts, it's not, we're not like intentionally trying to remove people from the program. We just set a bar, and not everybody gets to that bar sometimes for a variety of reasons, right? And we're transparent about that from day one. And that lets us challenge people to rise up to something instead of, just making the standard what it is and fighting with people over whether or not they should be graduating. This is the standard. And I want to help you get there. I don't want to remove anybody from the program, but you have to hit that standard in order to remain in the program. So the reason it's called Gauntlet is because you have to, make it through the gauntlet to get to the other side.
Yeah, I was really interested in your answer to that question, because I had a friend who went through Lambda, and she had a great experience. She found a great job immediately afterwards, and it was awesome for her. But then, there's reviews online, so I was really interested to hear your answer, because there's that fundamental tension between, like the commercial responsibility to the student as a customer that you mentioned versus the educational responsibility to help them.
Yeah, it's a lot cleaner when, for Gauntlet, my responsibility is not to make the students happy.
Right.
Obviously, I hope that sometimes they are happy. My responsibility is to make them great. And those are very different things.
Yeah, and it seems like it seems better suited to a commercial and education environment as well.
Agreed.
Yeah. I was reading about Gauntlet, and I think the way someone described it was like Stanford level education mixed with Survivor. And I was like, that one sounds kind of awesome. Two, I was curious what that Survivor piece actually meant. So it's more like you just set like, hey, this is this week's bar. If you meet it, you move forward. If you don't meet it, we'll see you later. Do you fly them back, or you just like cut the strings, get home?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think, I'll take the Survivor analogy over a Squid Games analogy. That one's
That's fair.
probably more appropriate. But yeah, I mean, our goal is to not necessarily be cutthroat or ruthless. Our goal is to set really high standards and to acknowledge that. I mean, if I were, and that was, that's a frustration that everybody who hires people shares, right? If you know exactly, so our promise to the employer is that we're going to give you someone who is very smart. We test for that. Who is incredibly hardworking. We both monitor that, and you don't make it through the gauntlet without doing that. And who's on the cutting edge of AI and will learn anything that they need to really quickly. That's a very easy bet for an employer to make. And when, as someone, I've hired and fired and laid off more than I would have liked to. It's very, very, very difficult to do from resume and interviews. So it's a level of selection and vetting that really only we can do. I mean, there used to be a world where, the first hiring partners were like this, we ran something like this in the 90s where we would take everybody from Stanford and then, get them into the web. But back then they could rely on the top schools having selected for that. So they could say, I can close my eyes and hire someone from Stanford, and they're incredibly smart, incredibly hardworking. And one of the reasons they came to us is they felt like they lost the ability to do that, to where it's not a guarantee that if you hire from the top schools, people are smart or hardworking anymore the same way it used to be.
So it was the 80 to 100 hour week, this like high bar. Is that more so to filter out candidates, or is that more so a necessity in your mind in order? Why that versus 50-hour weeks for a longer period of time? Like, is it more just filtering out candidates, or is it more like this is necessary for you to get where you need to be with AI? You need complete immersion.
It's both. So I think and there are a couple, so I'll talk about the learning side of that first, because there are a couple avenues of that. One is our responsibility is to have people on the cutting edge of what's available in AI. And that changes every day. So we spend a significant amount of our time just playing with and knowing about the most recent. I could run around I don't know when this will be published, but GPT-5 came out yesterday. Everybody in Gauntlet has a very strong opinion about what GPT-5 is good at and what it's bad at, and that's been 24 hours. That's what is required to be in the Gauntlet. Now, can you do that in 40 hours a week? Maybe. So the first piece is the learning as AI, getting to the cutting edge of AI does take a deeper level of immersion. And we tell folks that even after they join a company and they're working full time, you should probably dedicate about an hour a day, because that's the pace at which AI is moving, just to keeping up with, what's coming out.
Interesting. Yeah.
And then the other part is there is something special in high pressure intensity environments that I don't think you can quite replicate with a lax schedule. And there's the vetting of, a lot of these people are going to go to companies that aren't going to be 40-hour work weeks anyways. So, I mean, there are a lot of people that start Gauntlet and they think that we're lying about the 80 to 100-hour weeks and that they're going to be able to coast through. And, at the pace that we move, we do monitor how much time you spend working, but we don't even need to, because you cannot, the times when someone's like, hey, I'm trying to do 40 hours a week and get through, you can immediately tell when you look at their output. And students don't always believe that. They think I can, I'm special, so my output can be better than my input. Never happens. So we do monitor both, and you'll get called out both on the raw hours you put in and on the product if you're not going all in.
Yeah.
So walk me through like a weekly challenge. What does that look like? Are those something that are kind of predetermined and put on a syllabus beforehand, or is it something that every week you're like, hey, this week's challenge, go build a ticketing system that uses
now
AI to sort.
GPT-5's out. Let's do something with that.
So it is. So I mean, we have a curriculum and we have a plan in the long run, but that's not all shared with the students up front, and it absolutely changes. Okay. So to give you an idea, on day one of Gauntlet, you come in and this cohort was, okay, you need to build a Grammarly clone. You're all, here's a product requirement document. Here are the requirements. Here's how we're going to grade it. Here's, the full syllabus. Here's the test that it has to pass in order to move on to next week. So it has to be, fully functioning clone. And then toward the second half of the week, we're going to be adding AI like into the product. But from minute one of Gauntlet, you are not allowed to write any code. AI has to write all of the code. We're going to teach you the basics of how to do that, and then you're going to get really good at it.
Wow.
So we'll go over, introduction to AI first programming for an hour and a half. And then, we wrap that up, and then we say, okay, you have 24 hours. Your Grammarly clone your MVP of Grammarly is due in 24 hours. Turn it in by 3 p.m. tomorrow, or you're removed from the program. And then the learning begins. So it's structured originally. There are a bunch of different ways I could answer that question. So, in that week, we pick projects in the early weeks where what we're teaching with AI is immediately applied in the best way in that project. So for Grammarly, we might teach something like RAG, where you're getting the data in the right place so that so that's kind of how we build the curriculum. What's the experience we want people to have? What are the things they want to know? Okay, based on those things, what's the best project? And then what are the best learnings that we can tie in? So each week is a different challenge toward the end. So this cohort, week 2 is a mobile app. So you're barely starting to get your feet under you building web apps using AI. Now you have to build a mobile app. That's a completely different environment.
Interesting.
A bunch of the stuff that you just learned no longer works. There's some more stuff that you do have to learn. And then we go into open source week, where there's some open source projects, and that's on a team. So that week there's still a bunch of AI stuff, but it's really focused on, okay, you can build greenfield projects by yourself. Now, can you figure out how to do that with a bunch of other people? Because if you just let your AI go nuts and write all sorts of code, there's going to be crazy merge conflicts across your teams. Then you're starting to feel good. You're starting to feel good on a team. You can feel good cross-platform. Then we go into Enterprise Legacy Week. So that's like, okay, cool. You're doing this all on greenfield stuff. Here's a project that hasn't been updated since 1998. It uses old templating systems, languages you've never touched before. I know you can get AI to write React in a brand new app. We're going to make it as nasty as possible. I mean, we had people writing stuff in Fortran, just to, and the learnings from that are, now I can jump into any nasty legacy enterprise code base. I know how to both understand it from my perspective and from AI's perspective. I know how to prune my context so that AI doesn't lose sight of the context window, but it knows how to write code within that existing ecosystem that you don't get to create, so you don't get to cheat and choose all the easy stuff, because the vast majority of software is in messy worlds, often spinning up a project from zero where you get to pick the best AI-friendly tech stack. You've got to figure it out. And then we go into hiring partner projects. So there's
so there's definitely like
obviously don't have enough time to get into all the details, but it's structured, it's very intense, it's intentional, and we generally start highly scaffolded and then slowly take the scaffolding away as you get more confidence and increase the level of difficulty with each week.
That's awesome. Yeah. No, it's, I like that you have a focus on legacy and enterprise systems as well. There's so many, especially on like you go into like social media spaces around AI, and all the focus is on, it's like, hey, check out this 3JS website that I just coded up in 5 minutes, and it's like, yeah, it's really cool and impressive in its own right, but like, it
is wild that AI can do that.
Exactly, but it's also like, show me something, show me a product.
Yeah, you can one shot some stuff. That's really cool. And actually, our first the first cohort, to give you an idea of how the curriculum changes, first cohort, you had a week to build a Slack clone, and then a week to build AI features. That was in January. By the time this cohort started in July, first of all, AI could one-shot Slack. So in the past cohort, WebSockets and having multiplayer work was really difficult with AI, which is why we chose it for the first project. And you had 2 weeks to do it. So you had a full week just to get Slack fully baked out. I mean, it's is complex, right? There's
Yeah.
multiplayer, there's channels, there's different threads, there's auth. You have to learn how to do all this stuff, and you're figuring out how to use AI to write the code for you. That's a lot. But in this week, you had, and then the next week we would add in AI features where you would have the avatar respond like somebody, or you could have it respond auto summarize something that you could pre-send, stuff like that.
Okay.
Now that's all so much easier that you've got to do all of that in a week.
Yeah, I was recently in Brazil, and I did a little tour of Sao Paulo or whatever, and there happened to be a guy on the tour he's an engineer at Google. He works on the payments team. And he was saying that I was talking to him, and he was saying that he writes 70% of his code now for his job, like is written purely with AI. And it's crazy how fast it's moving.
You would be hard pressed to find anybody by the end of Gauntlet, unless they're literally building like on the Linux kernel, they won't write code manually.
Yeah.
AI, it takes a long time, and the kind of the closer to the metal or the older or the more complex the system is, the longer it takes. Like it's not.
Yeah.
Not everything is as easy as telling Grok to build a video game and it just builds it, right?
I get even simple things nowadays, though. To your point, like I get so bored of coding without AI. Like when I have to go. So for my job, I help. I have a couple things going, but for part of what I do for work, I help somebody manage some short-term rental websites, and I get so irritated when I have to go write HTML by hand now. It's the most boring thing in the world.
Totally. Yeah. So pretty much everybody gets to the point where they don't write code anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not in the Elon promised land where neural nets are doing everything for you.
Yeah. But so, Austin, what do you say when people say something like coding is dead? Like, what's your response to that when people say you don't need to learn how to code, you need to learn how to work with AI?
I mean, you still have to know what good looks like. So in the first cohort, we selected a handful of people who had never written a line of code to kind of run that experiment. And they definitely get to the point where they can vibe code apps, right? And their learning curve was straight up. They had to learn so much to go from never writing a line of code to where they could probably solve basic code challenges just through osmosis and immersion. And we built a bunch of stuff on the back end that we have AI models that will watch how you work and identify what you're doing incorrectly, and then generate a curriculum for you to, it's like, oh, you're not using systems design the right way, so you need to learn this. Here's the curriculum for you. Do that. And that helped a lot. But there's just a lot of knowledge, just the raw number of facts and design patterns and principles and data structures and algorithms that still today go into writing good code, that you have to learn that stuff in order to make what I'll call real stuff, right?
Yeah.
Stuff that's not going to break down, stuff that's going to be performant, stuff that you can sell, stuff that's secure. So I love people that vibe code apps. I think it's great. And I think it's important to recognize the limits of that and to not confuse the limits of, just vibe coding an app blindly to say AI can't build real stuff just because it's a skill issue, right? So
I see.
Both sides of that token are true. Vibe coding has its limits, but if you're a really good, the limits are actually not what the tools can do. The limits are what people know how to make the tool do. AI can do anything you want it to. And, if you're, like I said, there's some stuff where, Fortran, it's not great at Fortran out of the box. You have to do a little more massaging. You might have to fine tune the AI on something. Yeah. And generally that's not, what your day-to-day job is going to be. For what 99% of engineers are doing in their day-to-day, they should be writing very, very little code themselves if they were trying to do the job optimally. What does that look like in the future? I think, a Gauntlet engineer, an AI first engineer, their job is, it basically increases the level of abstraction. Like none of us write assembly anymore, or, nobody writes binary, even though binary is there. And I think it was Martin from A16Z basically said, for every for every era of technology, it's been true that whatever you're building, you need to understand one layer of the stack below that, so you understand what's not working and why. So I think right now, to understand like so if you work your way up the stack from like binary to assembly to C to, we'll say just Python, JavaScript at the highest level. I know that's not, we're not focusing on the details here, but
Focusing on concepts.
yeah, if you're writing JavaScript or Python, now you're using AI to write JavaScript or Python. You need to understand the JavaScript or Python in order to make it work well. Do you have to write assembly anymore? Not often, but I do think understanding one layer below just the prompts is necessary.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. You brought up earlier that junior dev jobs of the market for those has kind of collapsed. And there are a variety of reasons why. Obviously, these days, AI is a big contributor. I'd be curious to hear your perspective. It doesn't sound like you guys are interested in solving this problem specifically yourselves, but I'd be interested to hear your perspective on if you think an approach like Gauntlet could be adapted to kind of, not necessarily revive those junior jobs, but to be able to sort of, level up people who would otherwise be juniors straight into, mid-level.
Yeah, I think that does work. I think the model that we have is probably not the best for that right now, because I have to. Right now, what makes the model work is the frenzy from employers when they come through Gauntlet and they see what someone can do and they say, what does it cost? I'll pay anything. Like, all right, we can, we can make that work. That level of it's not there for most juniors. I mean, we do have, there are people straight out of college in Gauntlet. There are people without experience in Gauntlet, but they're really good at writing code. We're not the right path for 99% of junior engineers, right?
Mm-hmm.
I am very interested in solving that problem. I don't know exactly how to solve it. One of the Gauntlet engineers right now is taking BloomTech's curriculum and turning it into an AI assisted tutor, kind of like a synthesis or an alpha school, something like that. But the problem of the fundamental problem is one in the job market, where it used to be, I mean, we'll take the most charitable interpretation of this problem that there is. And it used to be you could hire junior engineers for less money, and then they would grow into senior engineers. You'd get some value out of them as a junior, but you're really banking on the future pipeline of senior engineers. A few things happened. One, everybody realized that if you're a junior engineer and somebody takes a risk on you, a year later you can jump and get paid way more. And those pay scales adjusted much. The pay scales of hiring a junior did not adjust as quickly in any company as just leaving and joining another company. So companies rarely saw the benefit of hiring juniors. It was kind of a charitable. There were some juniors who were awesome and some juniors who were like, well, it's a pipeline thing. We need to be training the next generation. When ZERP ended and the tax law changed to where you couldn't expense engineering costs anymore, now that doesn't make as much sense. At the same time, Elon showed us that you can run a company with 10% of the people and everything will be fine. And AI started being able to, the first companies we worked with, they had very sophisticated systems to where, a very highly paid senior architect level engineer would take a problem. They would spend all their time breaking it down into really bite-sized pieces, defining exactly what it was, giving a really good spec so that you could have a junior engineer sit there and solve, kind of the very, very broken down, very well-defined problem. And pretty quickly they found that AI could do that. So now, why are you hiring a bunch of junior engineers to solve all the really well-defined problems? What you actually need is a bunch of more senior people who can understand the problem and then break it down, and then AI can do what the junior engineer used to do. So I do think that is very real in the hiring market. And it's difficult for a junior engineer. I don't know exactly what to do about it, because from a company's perspective, there's just not a great short-term reward for hiring junior people.
I mean, kind of the answer might be, though, that the junior people need to learn, like they've got to have a Gauntlet-ish experience where they take their coding, marry it with AI, so that then they do bring that value and say, like, hey, I can use AI to answer all these questions, to take care of all these things. So maybe we're in like this
Yeah,
dead spot
I
right
think
now
that's
where like the
I think
education
that's the
system
best.
hasn't caught up.
That's the best bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I go around to colleges, and I think we're going to do this probably not this summer, but next summer. We're talking about it this summer, but just didn't get to it in time. All of the Stanford students that we talked to were like, they don't allow us to use AI in any of our classes, right? Because
Crazy.
in university settings, that's just what you use to cheat, right? Hey, can you write this algorithm? No, but Claude can. Doesn't really, that doesn't help.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there is an opportunity to, and a lot of them are, they're figuring stuff out on their own on the side, but that probably exacerbates the problem more than anything. Like the class of engineers who know the least about AI is probably the class of engineers who could benefit the most from using AI.
Yeah.
So that'll probably work itself out over the long run. But yeah, it's just a tough market to be very junior right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's going to be a big shift. It also is indicative how early we still are with AI. Like it truly
so early.
It hasn't even permeated the education system yet. Like I think we're so far away from that happening.
No, the education. I mean, my kids go to a school where AI does all the instruction and there are no teachers, but that's the rare minority.
Oh, is this Alpha school? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My kids go to Alpha, which is incredible.
Which I'm kind of obsessed with. On a side note, and
we've talked about it a few times, I think, on here.
Yeah. It's
really
incredible.
Cool. Yeah.
I'm like this one. I'm sure teachers are terrified when they hear about this, but like it just opens.
They shouldn't be, because the part of the alpha model that makes it all work. I mean, they probably lean too hard into we don't have teachers, because the point is like the classroom model of a teacher in front of the students is not the right model for learning for anybody.
Yeah.
But they have awesome, they call them guides, and they're not doing the academic part of the teaching, but all of the emotional support, the goal setting, the guidance, they're still there for that. And they're really important, and they're brilliant and highly paid. But I mean, trying to convince the existing public education system to adopt anything within a mile of that is a non-starter. Just there's not only interest, there are like, I've read some of the notes from the meetings where they're trying to get a charter, and normally the charter, like who decides who gets a charter is basically the teachers union. So, Alpha schools can have a tough time getting charters. But there are literally people who are like, oh, I feel like I was put on the earth to stop you from being able to do this, like level of pushback.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but
yeah,
we're fortunate. My kids love it. And I think there is going to be, like in the old world of education, there were really expensive private schools who basically gave you the same, maybe a slightly higher academic education, but a much more posh lifestyle and network. But the academics were not that different from the top private school to the top public school. You talk to some of the Alpha high school kids today, and it's like, the people who started in Alpha, which there's not very many of them, it was, started small. Like, I'm 15 years old. I've aced the SAT. I have I've got 5s on a dozen AP classes. I'm, basically they're going to go to Stanford and be bored because they're that far ahead academically. There, That is new. There's always kind of there's a public and private divide where all the rich kids went to private in some areas, but this is new. This is the first time that like the academics and learning has been very fundamentally different from one system to the next.
Which truly, I just am so passionate about this, I think, because what I value, maybe not the most, but it's up there, top 3 value adds of AI is this democratization of knowledge and the ability to really help on an individual basis, like unique people progress in what they need, which I live in Massachusetts and private school is a huge thing here still. And
we grew up in Utah together in
public school.
Public
I grew up
schools
in
and private
Utah.
schools
I didn't know that private school
different.
existed.
Yeah. I was
right,
like,
exactly. It's like you got
in
Juan
movies.
Diego, you got Judge Memorial.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's got to be the future. And I think I like what you're saying about Alpha School, that they do still involve that human element, because I think people are terrified of this idea that humans are out of the loop and it's just machines dictating what's taught.
Yeah, I mean, the machines are way better at determining what you understand, what you need, how to give it to you.
They're
infinitely
objective.
patient. They're way. I mean, if you just objectively look at what machines are good at and what they're not good at, teaching should be like the number one thing that is assigned to machines.
The one that
For sure.
Yeah.
The kind of area of education I'm most interested in watching evolve specifically is math, because I feel like math, more than any other field of education, is so teacher dependent. I thought that I was bad at math for years until I had a great math teacher in ninth grade. Shout out to Mr. Krupa. And after that, like, I really liked math, and I got way better at it basically overnight just by having the right teacher. And I've become convinced that that's
I don't want to turn into an alpha sales pitch necessarily, but my daughter. So we moved around a lot because company stuff and COVID and life. So she bounced around from school to school. She's also kind of our guinea pig, where I would try all the different private schools with her, and some I was not enamored with. Alpha, so we were like, Alpha is the school that I always held up as like, I've seen hundreds of schools. I was like, if our kids could go there, I would be so happy. And then when we had to move to Austen to start Gauntlet, it was like, that's
all right.
that was the thing that got my wife over the edge of actually being able to move to Austen. And it turns out we're not the only people that feel that way. There are a bunch of people who are out here because of Alpha. Now Alpha's expanding more, but so I have a son who's now 9 and a son who's 7 and a daughter who's now 9. And so they entered and had very different experiences at Alpha. Like my son was, he's very nerdy. He loves math. And so he flew through, would have been in first grade when he went to Alpha. And he was only in there for 4 months by the time the school year ended. And he'd basically finished 3.5 years of math in those 4 months.
Wow.
So he's way ahead. My daughter, we dropped her in what would have been, they found, or I guess it would have been 4th grade. And they found the AI found very material gaps in her math understanding that we had no idea about. She was in public school, she was just passing everything with flying colors, right?
Yeah.
But there were a couple of things with, multiplication of fractions and stuff like that like she'd just I don't know if she didn't understand or because for whatever reason, she had gaps. And, I look back on my education experience and I can now identify the gaps that I had in like 5th and 6th grade in math that, like, if you don't learn how to use fractions well, you will not be good at algebra, right? You cannot be.
Yeah.
And then I look around at, I ended up like in all the most advanced math classes that our school offered, but I wondered how many of the kids that like thought that they sucked at math literally missed one concept somewhere along the way. Yep. And everything on math builds on that, and no way identified it. So, and you're also just on the conveyor belt. So if you fall behind, you're just going to get farther and farther and farther behind.
Yeah. 30 kids to one teacher. It's like,
And reading is even more so that way, right? Where like, my wife was a school teacher, and you go to class and there are kids in 10th grade who can't read. And it's like, we've got to get them, understanding X. Until they read, there's 0% chance that everything else is a waste of time. And, we still got to graduate the kids somehow. So we'll, make sure that we lie about something. But AI is perfectly adapted to educational settings in ways that people are still far too dismissive of and are not very noticeable yet. But if you walk into an Alpha classroom of people who've been there a few years, it is noticeable.
I will be really interested to see when studies and stuff start being done is where the limits of AI in education are. Just because like the ceiling, as I can imagine it, is basically unlimited.
Yeah, they're running into that problem now.
Really interesting
where
to
they're
see
like, what do we do with a 15-year-old who's finished everything in high school and has a perfect SAT score? Like, he's got 3 more years of school ostensibly. Feels like there's probably something really valuable we could be doing right now. What is that? And kind of figuring that out from first principles is really interesting to watch. But
let me pitch everybody on competitive debate.
There you go.
I did it in high school, and I think that it's just about the best competitive activity that you can do in school.
I mean, again, don't want to turn this into an alpha sales pitch, but they do 2 hours a day of like the academic on the computer stuff, and the rest of the day is what they call workshops or like life skills. And my daughter was in one of the debate groups, and that's what they learned, which was fascinating in Austen, because you have the guy who ran Trump's campaign up against like the leader of Planned Parenthood's kid, and they both want to switch sides, and like debate the other side. So it's a very interesting. Anyway,
That's
just a
fascinating.
random
Yeah, very
anecdote.
like polarized. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the kids
I
are up
love
for it. They want.
I love
they're open minded and want
switch
to
side
like.
debate. I love that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's amazing. Austen, this is okay. Actually, I have 2 questions before we wrap up, and Spencer, you probably have some too. But one, you mentioned this just like briefly that at Gauntlet you have an AI that's continually like observing and evaluating and identifying gaps in students' understanding. Is that technology something you would ever spin off into its own thing to offer to schools, to things like that, or is that more like we're keeping this in house? This is Gauntlet's kind of bread and butter
No,
here
we
that we can help.
definitely. I mean, there are a bunch of things that we've built for ourselves that we're like, man, this is really valuable. We should probably find a way to spin it out. We have one engineer at Gauntlet. We keep trying to hire Gauntlet grads for ourselves, but they're already hired by everybody else, so we can't get any. But yeah, we have one engineer who's written like 5 million lines of code himself, and all of our systems and everything's completely architected and organized in the background with one engineer in like half a day. And some of the stuff that he's built, we're like, we need to find a way to commercialize that because it's really cool. But yeah,
Okay.
I need to figure that out is the short version.
So like, yes, but just focusing on Gauntlet right now, kind of. I mean, it's early, but
there are 10 different things that I want to spin out of what we're doing, but we need to find the right way to do that. Yeah.
It's so interesting how common that pattern is, I think, for anybody working in startups these days, because it's become so easy to start spinning stuff up. Like there's a handful of things that I'm working on for work that I'm like, hey, this could easily become an independent service someday. And like, I started spinning it up just because like I needed it. And I knew that it would be easy to spin up.
Yeah, I mean, when our hiring partners come in and this literally happens all the time. We're like, all right, here's something that we wanted to build out over the next 6 months. And then a Gauntlet student turns around 24, 48 hours later and they're like, all right, I'm done. And it's production ready. You're like,
one
okay.
guy.
Yeah, literally. I mean, I know it sounds like at one point will either decide to stop apologizing for it or to like just acknowledge that I know it sounds insane, but come see it. I know what I sound like when I say that, but if it's true, I don't know how to not say it. So yeah.
Well, the thing that I've gotten appreciation for, a greater appreciation for now, is that there are a ton of services and software applications out there that are, the perfect example of like a mile wide but an inch deep, right? Like there's tons of integrations with third-party services that get into it, et cetera, but it's not actually that deep technically. So it's, you get surprised at how fast you can spin up these huge systems just because like, AI is really, really good at a mile wide and an inch deep.
Totally.
That's like where it excels best right now.
Of course, the hard part of building most companies is building the right thing, not necessarily just building. Yeah. So having somebody walk in and say, hey, this is exactly what our customers want, that's part of the hard part,
Yeah.
For us, the easy part is the software. We can build anything. We can build anything so fast, which is a little unique. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. So this is just a general question for you, Austen, because you're at the forefront teaching the frontline soldiers in this AI. We'll call it the AI Rebellion because we're on the AI Rebels podcast. But like, you're there. You're so current. What are some maybe hopes and fears of where AI is and where it could go? Like, is there anything that you really want to see happen, and anything that you're kind of scared could happen?
Yeah, I don't have. Okay, let's see. So one fear that I have is, for me, in the coding specific landscape, I look at all these partnerships and acquisitions that are happening. And right now we have a world where every tool that you want works with every model, and you kind of have freedom of choice of everything. There are no walled gardens. I look at how, yesterday when OpenAI launched GPT along with Cursor, and right after they almost bought Windsurf, but then Google kind of bought Windsurf, and like I worry that, and Claude already only works with Claude. I worry that their stuff is going to get a lot more walled off, and
Yeah.
You have to choose your team.
Almost inevitable. Yeah. Because right now it's awesome. You can just, if I want this model, I'll swap it out with one click. And if I want that tool, so that makes me nervous a little bit. But then the thing that makes me excited is like just the rate of change. All that Gauntlet engineers have to do is get to the edge and ride the wave, because the wave is so extreme. I look at all these, like, I feel really bad for all the people trying to compete to build the next model, because they'll drop $1 billion on hardware and spend 6 months training it, and it's 1% better and it wins for like 2 weeks, and then I swap it out with one line of code 2 weeks later.
Crazy.
It's awesome to be a consumer of all this stuff, right?
It is.
You win and win and win. Even though I spend outrageous amounts on compute. But,
the way that I put it is, I am really glad that I am building a startup with AI, not building an AI startup.
Yeah.
Building an AI startup
is
a prop position right now.
Yeah, it's tough. Then I look at, I'm a tiny investor in Replit, and I invested when they had a bunch, big community, but they didn't really have that much. They didn't have meaningful revenue. Yeah. And, watching them grow to 100 million in revenue over, I think it was like basically 9 months, six months, from like 3 million ARR to 100 million ARR. Like, I'm like, yeah, maybe I don't feel bad for you when that's the case. And you're not even like, you're not like, when people think about AI coding, you might not be in the top 3 or 4 things that people think about, and you still grew to 100 million ARR overnight.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was actually going to ask you specifically about Replit, because I started using Replit back back in the day, I did a web dev boot camp myself, and forced myself to focus and actually learn the coding skills that I kind of had but didn't really. Anyways. And so I used it back then, and it's been insane to watch their growth. And like you said, like they're still kind of a small bit player, but
right.
Yeah. So what Replit is really, really good at is deployment and server management and stuff like that.
Interesting.
Because that's the way they started was like making it so that you could write code in a browser that would run on real hardware somewhere. Right.
Yeah.
And that's a very difficult problem to solve. And it's one that, if you're an engineer, you will spend a lot of time solving. So a lot of Replit's market right now is people who don't know or understand how to do that. Like having it out of the box just work. Like you can, instead of, having a button and it's like, okay, cool, it runs, now go deploy it on AWS and buy a domain name and all that stuff. So for vibe coders who are a little less technical and don't want to figure out deployment, or anybody who doesn't want to figure out deployment, it's the best way to go from built, like if you're, it deploys for you, which is incredible. Yeah. And they choose the right, they've very intentionally picked the right security settings and the right databases and the right languages, so that you can do that. So it's really, really good for 0 to 1. If there's someone who's non-technical and wants to build an app that they actually will deploy, 100% Replit's the place you go. Now they're pretty far behind as far as like, can you make it as extensible and flexible as some of the other stuff, where if you're like an engineer at a random company, you may not use Replit as your daily driver other than for prototyping. But it turns out that's still a giant market too, and we'll see what happens.
I was going to say, when ChatGPT 4 first launched, I started building out a little, my first idea of what to do with it was build out a test-driven agent platform, a coding agent platform, I should say. And as I was getting into it, I was like, man, I started running into just all of the security problems that I would run into, running these containers online. And that gave me a much deeper appreciation for what Replit was doing and what they continue to do.
They've got a decade head start on everybody else.
To solve either. Like,
going from
they are boring, terrible problems to solve.
It's a very different than here's a Docker container. Good luck.
Right. Exactly. Like, it's a
interesting,
a different consideration. And even, the structures that exist already within a lot of languages are not, nearly secure enough to
Yes.
trust in when you truly arbitrary code. Anyways, as we're wrapping up here, Jake, do you have any more questions?
Just a general question for you, Austin, of advice you would give to people who you're educating people all the time about AI. What advice would you give to the general public, people who maybe use ChatGPT every once in a while, but like how can they kind of ride this wave? Maybe not quite to the Gauntlet level, but how can they stay current?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't want to assume that your audience shouldn't be applying to gauntletai.com. So our bottleneck right now is definitely students, not companies. So please apply if you think that might be interesting. We are going to work on
Definitely.
a non-technical version of Gauntlet, probably early next year,
Cool.
where we can't guarantee $200,000 jobs on the other side in the same way, but maybe $100,000 jobs, maybe a little more guaranteed, and we'll fly out to Austen and teach you how to use AI.
That's great.
So we'll work on that. But yeah, 99% of people could just use AI for stuff they're not using it for generally. So, I mean, the generic advice is, I guess it's going to be GPT-5. It used to be 4.0 that I would recommend. Just like get, Chat GPT, pay him $20 a month. You're welcome, Sam. Just kidding. You don't need my help. And yeah, just play with it. See where it bends, see where it breaks. And when it breaks, ask the model what you should be doing differently. That's one thing that I don't see nearly enough people doing.
It's surprising how good they are at introspection, for lack of a better term, like at introspecting about their own behavior. And
say, of all the stuff that you just told me, what's the most likely to be bad advice, or what's the most likely to be wrong? It will tell you, and it knows why, and it's a probabilistic model at the end of the day, and it can tell you probabilistic stuff. So yeah, don't be afraid of asking it that.
If people want to follow you, follow Gauntlet, what are the best channels, best ways to do that?
Yeah, I'm Austen on Twitter, AUSTEN, and on pretty much every channel, Gauntlet is Join Gauntlet AI.
Awesome.
Join Gauntlet AI.
Thank you
yeah,
so
we'll drop that in the description. Awesome. Thanks for coming on, Austin.
Good guys.